When a neighborhood, Karen tried to weaponize fake HOA enforcers to shut down a child's swing set. She thought she'd win the war. But her plan exploded in her face when the fake cops were caught red-handed, and the community turned the tables in a jaw-dropping twist that no one saw coming. In a quiet, family-oriented neighborhood governed by a homeowners association, tensions had long simmered beneath the surface, especially around one resident notorious for enforcing unspoken rules. This resident, often referred to as Karen among the community, had developed a reputation for policing lawns, toys, and even the volume of laughter from children. Her most recent target was a brightly colored backyard swing set installed by a young family for their two children. The structure, while well-maintained and safely installed, stood out due to its cheerful design and vibrant paint, a symbol of joy to some, but an eyesore in Karen's eyes. Karen claimed that the swing set violated HOA aesthetic standards, citing ambiguous language in the HOA's governing documents about outdoor fixtures and visual uniformity. However, those guidelines typically applied to front-facing property features, not backyard recreational structures that were barely visible from the street. Despite this, Karen took it upon herself to enforce her interpretation of the rules. Instead of formally filing a complaint with the HOA board, she escalated the issue on her own terms, initiating what would become an elaborate and suspicious campaign to eliminate the swing set. Without prior warning or an official letter from the HOA board, violation notices began appearing in the family's mailbox. The notices were typed on generic HOA letterhead, printed in low resolution, and lacked any official signatures or contact information from board members. They accused the homeowners of noncompliance, demanded the immediate removal of the swing set, and threatened escalating fines if action was not taken within 72 hours. The tone of the letters was aggressive and unusually urgent, diverging from the HOA's typical process of sending formal notices, allowing time for appeal, and facilitating discussion. Things took a strange turn when two men arrived at the family's doorstep wearing uniforms that loosely resembled security attire. They introduced themselves as HOA compliance officers and stated they were authorized to enforce visual code violations. They presented laminated name badges with no accompanying business cards or identification connected to a specific HOA department. The men cited the same language used in the fake notices and demanded that the swing set be dismantled immediately to avoid further action. The interaction left the homeowners confused and intimidated. There had been no HOA meetings, no official letters, and certainly no mention of third-party compliance officers being hired by the board. The supposed officers refused to provide a copy of their enforcement orders and would not answer questions about which specific rules had been violated. Their only concern was the removal of the swing set, insisting it clashed with the visual standards of the community and implied that further refusal to comply could lead to legal consequences. As word spread, neighbors began questioning the sudden enforcement campaign. Several families had installed similar swing sets or backyard play equipment without issue. None had ever been told to remove them. The HOA board had no record of complaints or actions related to this matter. Additionally, no one could recall a vote to hire outside enforcement agents or implement new aesthetic standards. Suspicion grew when the same violation notices appeared in the mailboxes of other residents who had backyard furniture, trampolines, or decorative garden features, most of whom had previously had run-ins with Karen over minor disputes. The pattern became undeniable. It appeared that Karen, frustrated by what she deemed violations of neighborhood order, had taken it upon herself to manufacture a false enforcement system, likely in collaboration with individuals posing as compliance officers. These developments raised serious questions. Who were these men claiming to represent the HOA? Were they hired privately? Were they being paid? And how had they obtained access to specific addresses and personal information? The possibility of impersonation, intimidation, and privacy violation became more plausible by the day. What had begun as a simple dispute over a child's swing set had now escalated into a coordinated and deeply unethical scheme, one that appeared to involve falsified documents, misrepresentation of authority, and the use of fake officials to impose personal will on fellow residents. While many in the community had grown accustomed to Karen's interference in minor issues, this incident marked a breaking point. The boldness of deploying fake HOA officers and fabricating official notices crossed a line that the neighborhood could no longer ignore. Behind closed doors, some residents began comparing notes, digging into HOA documentation, and preparing to confront what was shaping up to be a dangerous abuse of power. Karen's swing set crusade, initially meant to remove a brightly colored play structure from a family's yard, had spiraled into something far more serious. Her attempts to control the neighborhood through intimidation had triggered a larger response, one that would ultimately shine a spotlight not just on her actions, but on the shadowy impersonators she had apparently enlisted. What she didn't anticipate was that her carefully crafted sting would soon begin to unravel under the scrutiny of a watchful and increasingly united community. The supposed HOA compliance officers continued to make rounds in the neighborhood, issuing warnings to other residents whose properties featured backyard installations, decorative lighting, or colorful fences. Yet, with each visit, more red flags emerged. Their uniforms lacked consistency. Sometimes a patch was missing, other times their name tags were absent or unreadable. They refused to provide a contact number for the HOA board and deflected questions about who had authorized their visits. When pressed for official documents or identification, they claimed confidentiality or evasively redirected the conversation to community standards enforcement. Residents grew skeptical. Multiple homeowners began contacting the actual HOA board directly, only to be met with confusion and concern. The board had not issued any directives for enforcement regarding swing sets or aesthetic violations. No officers had been hired, and there had been no formal complaints filed in recent months. The board confirmed that all official notices would be mailed through proper HOA channels with identifiable contact information and a signature from a board member, none of which were present on the notices being distributed. Meanwhile, the family originally targeted over the swing set started keeping careful records. They preserved every notice, photographed the so-called officers during their visits from discrete locations, and kept detailed notes of conversations. Their evidence showed a clear inconsistency in both behavior and documentation. Additionally, they compared the language used in the fake violation letters to legitimate HOA correspondence and found glaring discrepancies in formatting, tone, and legal references. As suspicions intensified, neighbors compared their experiences and discovered a pattern. Every house targeted had recently interacted negatively with Karen or received complaints directly from her. Some had been involved in past disputes about lawn maintenance, party noise, or holiday decorations. It became increasingly clear that the supposed enforcement was not only unauthorized, but possibly driven by a personal vendetta. This mounting evidence forced the community to take a closer look at what was happening beneath the surface. The realization that someone may be impersonating authority to intimidate fellow residents sparked both outrage and urgency. The swing set, once the center of a petty complaint, now symbolized a much larger issue. Someone was attempting to manipulate the entire neighborhood using lies, fake power, and fear. And the cracks in that plan were beginning to widen. As the neighborhood grew more united in suspicion, a group of residents collaborated to gather irrefutable evidence against the so-called HOA compliance officers. Several homes installed discrete security cameras, aiming to document future visits. One resident positioned a camera near their mailbox, capturing footage of the men delivering another fake notice while wearing mismatched uniforms and carrying clipboards with no official documentation. Their behavior raised even more concern. There was no scanning of barcodes, no ID verification, and their inspection process was little more than a walk-by observation followed by handwritten notes. The final piece of the puzzle came when one neighbor, while recording from a second-floor window, captured clear audio of the men mentioning Karen by name. The video revealed one of the imposters saying, "Let's hit the one Karen pointed out," just before taping a violation notice to a gate. This moment confirmed what many suspected. Karen wasn't just reporting complaints, she was directing the operation. The coordination between her and the fake officers became undeniable. armed with video footage, copies of the fake notices, and confirmation from the HOA board that no such enforcement was authorized, residents compiled their findings into a formal report. This documentation was submitted to local authorities along with statements from multiple homeowners. Law enforcement quickly verified that the individuals impersonating compliance officers were not employed by any official entity, nor did they have any legal right to enter properties or demand compliance with supposed violations. When confronted by police, the fake officers could not produce licenses, employment records, or any contractual agreement with HOA. Their vehicle, caught on security footage, was registered to a private individual with no affiliation to any property management firm or municipal body. The evidence was overwhelming, and the story rapidly shifted from neighborhood drama to criminal impersonation. As the investigation deepened, authorities discovered that Karen had indeed hired the two men under the table, paying them to act as HOA enforcers to intimidate neighbors she personally disapproved of. The backlash was swift. Karen was reported to the HOA board for abuse of power and harassment, while the impersonators faced criminal charges for fraud and misrepresentation. What started as a targeted effort to remove a child's swing set had now exploded into a full-blown scandal that exposed a web of deceit. Following the exposure of the scam, the HOA board launched an immediate audit of its practices and enforcement procedures. With the evidence presented by residents, including the documented actions of Karen and the fake officers, the board moved quickly to ensure that such an abuse of power would never happen again. Karen, once the neighborhood's self-appointed enforcer, found herself facing serious consequences for her actions. The HOA levied a substantial fine against her for impersonation and harassment. Additionally, her actions were reported to local authorities who opened an investigation into her role in the scheme. The board made it clear that no resident would be allowed to misuse the HOA's name for personal vendettas, setting a precedent for accountability within the community. The two men posing as HOA compliance officers were also brought to justice. After thorough investigation, it was revealed that they had been operating under false pretenses, defrauding residents by impersonating official authorities. They were arrested and faced charges ranging from fraud to impersonation of public officials. The legal ramifications were swift and severe, serving as a stark warning to anyone else considering exploiting neighborhoods or residents for personal gain. Despite the tension and chaos that had unfolded, the community found strength in the aftermath. The swing set, initially at the heart of the dispute, remained in the backyard where it belonged. It had not only survived the attack, but had become a symbol of resistance against unwarranted control and intimidation. The children's laughter, once threatened, continued to fill the air as the neighborhood moved forward. In a show of unity and resilience, the neighborhood organized a celebratory barbecue, inviting all residents to gather and mark the moment of victory. It wasn't just a celebration of the swing set survival, but of the community's collective strength in the face of manipulation. The event was a turning point, reminding everyone of the power of collaboration, vigilance, and standing up for what was right. The community, now more aware and united than ever, put measures in place to protect against future abuses. With stronger communication between residents and the HOA board, any future attempts at deception or intimidation would be swiftly thwarted. What began as a simple dispute had brought the neighborhood closer together, and the lessons learned from this ordeal would shape how they work together to safeguard their homes and their peace. For more incredible stories of community justice and neighborhood showdowns, subscribe to Expect Stories.